like the old English colonials who used to put wigs on people and throw them in courts in the middle of Africa and say, you have laws. Stop wasting millions of dollars studying the Quran. They know nothing about the Quran. Absolutely nothing. Okay? 90% of these guys are born again. 90%. They have no religious education. Their religious education consists of, there's a war in Islam, it's heroic to kill Americans. I mean, I'm in Borneo and Sulawesi, literally, tribes that were cannibals just 2 generations ago. All they want to do is fight Americans in Iraq. It's the most heroic thing in the world right now. Stop wasting hundreds of millions of dollars with widgets. That's what our Defense Department does. Great grants with physicists doing scale-free modeling, and it has absolutely no relationship to anything in the world. Stop a catch-all approach to radicalization. It's very context-sensitive. I gave you the case. Much more public transparency by law enforcement. The English are the worst. And it's not their fault. The English are the worst because there's a law that says there cannot be no discovery until after the trial. There can be no public vetting of information. So the community is locked out. You get arrests. The people are very suspicious. The authorities say, trust us, and then they blow away at a Brazilian and say, oops, it's a mistake. We're much more successful in the United States. The NYPD is by far the best, okay, because they're scared to death there's going to be another attack, and if there's another attack, all money leaves Wall Street, and they're very serious. They got thousands of these guys on this. They reflect their ethnic community. They go into the ethnic community. They say, we don't want a problem. You don't want a problem. Let's work together. And they're all over the world. They're far and away better than the CIA and the FBI. The Turkish National Police, forget your images of Midnight Express. They're the best, okay? Their intelligence people are educated 4 to 8 years in the university. They got 150 of them here in the United States, Columbia, Harvard, Rutgers, and other kinds of places. And their way of doing it is, they come back from Afghanistan, let's give them presents for Ramadan, let's sit in the family, let's give them hospital care, let's talk. What to do? You got to deal with the structural problems of social alienation. If the police are intrusive and culturally alien, then the war on Islam will be more felt. Most important thing is things like the Boy Scouts. Remember I told you the greatest predictor, there are millions of people who support the jihad. The greatest predictor from going from support to violence has nothing to do with religion. It has to do whether you belong to a soccer club or not, or something like that. So Boy Scouts and football teams are going to be much more important, things like that, than studying the Quran. Provide, and this is the last slide, provide for alternate dreams and heroes that youth can connect to. Look at the new comic book series of Muslim superheroes, modeled on Marvel Comics, that's catching the attention of Muslim youth in Indonesia and now around the world. Science can be part of that dream, but it's got to be targeted to them. Faith in dreams and heroes, perhaps more than industry and power, gives impetus to lives and civilizations. I think their view is going nowhere, but they have the impetus. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. So despite all the signs and everything, we're way late. So 2 quick questions. We've got to go to a break, then we've got to come back and do some neuroscience. So this stuff is actually grounded in brains. 2 quick questions. Jerry Ostrom.
Thank you very much. That was really interesting. You're probably familiar with the very controversial effort at prediction markets that the Defense Department funded some economist friends of mine, actually. Do you have a view on that, and do you have a comment on the Patriot Act?
I'll start with Patriot Act. When the United States and the Soviet Union were at one another's necks, there were, estimates range, but there were tens of thousands of nuclear weapons that could have destroyed the United States and the Soviet Union and wiped out about 500 million people in 90 minutes. And actually what saved us from that was one person, his name is Vasily Arkhipov. During the Soviet missile crisis, the United States depth-charged Soviet sub. The Americans did not know that Khrushchev had given operational command of the release of nuclear missiles to the submarine commanders if they voted unanimously. 2 voted to release nuclear torpedoes. Vasily vetoed it, and that's why we're all here today. That was a real existential threat. We could have all disappeared. This is not. These guys, in their wildest dreams, and let me tell you, they're pretty much incompetent losers. They sometimes get lucky. They could do a 1 kiloton fizzle bomb, which would kill about 200,000 people. That's a lot of people, but that's not an existential threat to society. The existential threat comes from the reaction, as it is today, to such an attack. 3 Algerians from Paris blow up a park bench with a nuclear bomb in New York City. Tehran, let me tell you, will be vaporized within 24 hours. That's what will happen, and that's what will be a great thing. The trouble is the Patriot Act, I don't think, has much relevance at all to who these guys are. I don't think it's doing anything except either scaring some people, namely civil libertarians, that this is out of control, or reassuring other people who can't understand this phenomena. You know, they say Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda, Al-Qaeda when there isn't no Al-Qaeda, okay, and that are psychologically helped by it. Okay, now for financial markets. You mean the Poindexter thing where they were going to bid? I think that's a fantastic idea. Fantastic idea. And I think it's crazy that it was dropped. I think they would have gotten the best from people who aren't familiar with the field, but they would have gotten the best they could have gotten. I mean, just like Wikipedia. There would have been mistakes, but it would have been fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. Beatrice, do you have a microphone? Well, in that case, would you hang on for a second?
2 points. First, I completely agree with you that radicalization does not rely on religion per se, but I think to say that it doesn't also occur in mosques is naive and demonstrably untrue. There are many videotapes of imams passionately fomenting violence within a mosque setting, and I personally have as a patient an African-American Muslim who told me after 9/11 he began being ostracized from others at his mosque because he refused to listen and participate in fomenting of hatred against and violence toward America. The second point is I'm curious how you think football teams will help and why they would be different from soccer teams.
Okay, on your first point about my claim about the unimportance of mosques and imams being demonstrably false, I don't think a single anecdote is going to do it. We've got a database that involves thousands of cases, including all known cases of all terrorist attacks ever done, and it's not a significant factor. That's just a fact. Okay, so if you can show me countervailing data, I'd go for it, but we don't find it.
To claim that there isn't a role for that even within those social networks is not validatable, frankly.
What do you mean? Show me. If you believe that mosques are important, do mosque attendance. By the way, mosque attendance is also a negative predictor, but I'm not holding my breath. And as far as soccer teams go, it's not just soccer teams, right? It's the fact that all jihadi activities that we know of, there's never a case of a lone wolf, except very recently, some guys, high school guys, had bound up on the internet, and so one guy actually went out with a bomb, the first case we know of, but his buddies are in the chat rooms, right? But it's a group thing. It's usually 8 to 12 guys, because that's where your primary ties are against when you leave your family. You bound with buddies from 18 to 30 years old. After 30, it's geezerhood. And those ties that you make in your late teens and early 20s will drive you throughout your life. And those are the people you're going to die for, just as much as you would die for a family, even more during those particular years. Now, the only difference between people in general who do this and the guys who actually go out and blow themselves up or blow other people up is that one of them decides to do it and brings his buddies along. I mean, the Madrid guys, one guy was a candy salesman in the Jama Mezouak. His father told us he had nothing to do with religion, but he looked up to that little guy, you know, I said, he'd look at you and you'd shit in your pants. He took care of him. And so this guy says, we're going to blow ourselves up. He blew himself up. Okay? So if you can get groups, I mean, that's what the Boy Scouts were all about. That's what high school football was all about, to get people off the streets. You've got to get into their neighborhoods, into their cafes, into their restaurants, into their chat rooms, because that's where it all is. It ain't in the mosques, it ain't in the imams, and it sure ain't in the Quran.